Today I'm talking with Paul Fox, co-founder of EVIE, Australia's fast-charging DC network for electric vehicles. We're going to talk about EVIE, and as Paul has just landed home from the US and Europe, we'll get the latest on what's all the buzz from the other side of the world. So welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Carolyn. Great to be here and great to catch up again after seeing you at the AFMA conference, which was just before I left to go overseas. Spent a bit of time in the US, went to some conferences there, and then actually took some personal time off, which I won't bore you with my slideshow.
Oh, no, it's a long time since I've seen one of those. My first question was about EVIE itself. So if you just sort of let us know when EVIE was founded and what was the idea behind the business. And through a fast charging network.
Very well, maybe just at the biggest picture is we are an infrastructure company. We do charging infrastructure. We do it in public. We do it in the workplace, and we also support charging at home as well for our enterprise customers. And so we aim to provide charging wherever you shop, wherever you eat, wherever you play, and wherever you work. That's our mission. And we got started in mid-2017, so 6 years ago now. And I got to say, at that time, the world was very different. There were only a few thousand EVs in Australia. There was, some Nissan Leaf. There was some Tesla Model S. So the big boom just hadn't occurred. And I think, the question you've asked around how did we start and has it grown the way that we envisaged is a really good one, because it's the same question that often faces a fleet manager, embarking on this journey of electrification, because, they can do all kinds of research, but the future's not clear. And it certainly wasn't clear back then. It's a lot clearer now, but back then, definitely not. And so, a lot of the time you just got to get started, and that's exactly what we did. But you also have to have some good partners, and so we had a really solid partner right from the beginning, the St. Baker Energy Innovation Fund, and they provided some very patient money and capital, because what we're doing is very capital intensive. We've invested tens of millions of dollars in our public charging network, as well as building the internal capability around deployment and software and so forth. Back then, 2017, a few thousand vehicles on the road, no government support, but it was pretty clear that electric vehicles were going to happen. So it wasn't if, it was when, because as the cost of batteries fall, and they have fallen and continue to fall, there's been a bit of a glitch in the last couple of years. It just becomes more and more, it makes more and more economic sense. And that's often the big driver for these types of changes. It's economics. Lots of people are getting into this for reasons of climate change and pollution and so on. But in the end, what's going to be driving it is the basic economics. And I often point to the Uber drivers. They drive a lot of kilometres, and they've been quite big adopters of EV technology, because they know it's going to save them money. And all those benefits around tailpipe emissions and climate change, that just comes with the territory. So we kind of knew at the beginning that it would happen. It was just when. And so, but that makes it risky for an investor, because you're putting your money in here, and you're sort of saying, well, when am I going to get a return? And the further out that return happens, the less it is. It's as simple as that. And so now we're 6 years later, there's over 100,000 electric vehicles on the road. Our growth is quite literally exponential. I looked at a curve that one of our, and it looked like just going up for the sky, stratospheric. We're at somewhere around 7-8% of new car sales, sort of month after month over the last few months. So it's really happening. And I kind of feel like when I go overseas now, I don't feel like I need to kind of feel a little bit, oh, Australia's not doing really well, because I think we are now. And in a lot of these things, Australians jump in and they adopt new technology much faster than other nations once we get started. And we've certainly got started now.
Oh, great. Paul, I've got some questions for you.
Yeah.
I didn't know if I was going to get a pause or get
Sorry.
a...
You could raise your hand and then
Yeah.
I'll pause.
So just sort of back on the purpose that you originally envisaged
Yeah.
the company. Like, I get the whole when thing, but I just wondered if that changed. Like, are you exclusively a fast charging DC network? And is that what you originally envisaged, or is that what
Yes, it always was. Right
Okay.
from the beginning, we
Okay.
believed that Australia would leapfrog the older technologies and would go to DC fast charging, and we're seeing that. And we're also, when I'm overseas, I see a lot of the slower chargers sitting unused because people want the convenience and the power of the DC fast chargers. So when we got going, we didn't really know what and how we were going to do it. And so one of our big realizations, we looked at different business models. So, is it going to be software? Is it going to be some kind of an aggregator of other people's charges? But what we realized is this is infrastructure. And transportation has long relied on infrastructure, roads, bridges, traffic lights, all of these sorts of things. And charging is just another type of infrastructure. Infrastructure needs to be reliable. And the only way you get to reliability is by building, owning it, and operating it. And so that was a decision we made early. And then it was, where do we start? We decided to start with the highways. Why? Not necessarily because those chargers would be used the most, would be the most utilised, but because we realised that in people's minds, when they're thinking about buying an electric vehicle for themselves or their fleet, they were saying, what if I have to drive long distance? How am I going to recharge? And so we almost built that very first network as to address the psychological block to buying an electric vehicle. And we were very lucky to receive support from ARENA, the Australian Renewable Energy Agency, to build a network of 42 stations on the intercity network. So basically from Adelaide all the way up to Cairns. And we set out to build a network that was not just for luxury vehicles, but was for affordable vehicles, was for work vehicles. And so Tesla had built a network, and another player was also building a network, but they were building for luxury cars. So the chargers were much further apart. We put them closer together, and we did some network design and elements to do that. What has changed? So then, but not too long after that, we started to look at metropolitan charging, because that's where most cars get charged. And so we look to provide that metropolitan network. But that was always going to be part of the plan. I think one of the things we realised then is a little bit of a change is that fleets need a complete solution. So it wasn't enough to electrify fleets that we build this public network. We needed to be able to provide for them in the depot. We needed to provide for their contractors, their employees or their customers in the home. And we needed to be able to pull all of that information together into a single source so that they could manage their fleets with a single source. And so that was a later realization, and it's only been over the last couple of years that we created our fleet services business to address that, because we realized that it just wasn't happening fast enough with just waiting for people to start doing it. It wasn't fast enough to realize that they needed to have a complete solution.
And the projects that you're involved in, like, how is the EVIE brand sort of like, displayed? I mean, is it on the chargers itself, or?
Yeah, well, obviously on a public charging network, the brand is big, and so the EVIE bird, she features heavily. When when we're providing services for well, we talk about fleets, but it can mean all kinds of things. So, for example, car rental operators like Hertz. Okay, so for them, they've got dozens of depots across Australia, and we've installed chargers in those depots, mainly AC chargers, because that makes sense. But also we're putting in a couple of DC fast chargers because sometimes they need to turn around a car really quickly for those customers. Or sometimes they're just going to get caught short. I mean, that's kind of the way it goes. So that's one example where you provide that nationwide coverage. At the same time, when you rent a car from Hertz, you can get a car fob and you can charge on our public network. So it's an example, and we provide the data back. So that's an example of bringing the public charging and the depot charging together in a complete solution with the information that requires. Other customers, auto like Polestar, auto finance like Pepper Money, dealers need chargers at their locations, and that can be a source of bringing additional business into their locations, as well as catering to servicing. So as they service these cars, they need to get them charged up and back on the road fairly quickly. Councils like Kingston City Council, where they want some chargers in the depot, but also they want their council employees to be able to charge along the way. And you want to keep records of all of the locations and the costs of those chargings. And then utilities, and a good example of that is ActuAGL. We've partnered with them in Canberra. They got into electric vehicle charging very early. They built their own network. They started electrifying their fleet. But I think what they realised is, whilst they are, in a sense, in the infrastructure game, in that they have poles and wires and so forth, it's a very different kind of business. And so we partner together where we look after the charging aspects for them, and then they're able to bundle that up for their own fleet or for their end customers, residents or businesses in Canberra.
I'm looking forward to talking to you about your sort of recent overseas trip. But first, I think now's a good time to talk about your background. Is amazing. Like, it's a big Silicon Valley, the California, US-based venture capitalists and tech startups, home of Google and Facebook.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, can you tell us about that time, what you did, and what brought you home to Australia?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, all right. Well, I think what took me there is and it was just a great opportunity. I'm glad that I had that opportunity. But a friend asked me to join an electronics manufacturing company, and it was in the late 90s. And so that was kind of the years of the dot-com boom. And so this adventure started where I went around the world to Hungary and then Mexico, and then I ended up in San Jose, which is kind of the epicenter of the hardware business within Silicon Valley. And to be honest, I didn't know much about it when I arrived on the ground, but I learned fast, and I learned a lot over the succeeding 14 years. I think, why did I stay there? Partly because it was such an exciting place to work, but partly because my kids started school. And once your kids start school, you kind of end up staying somewhere for a while. It's just natural. And it was my kids in the end that kind of really prompted me to come home, because they were Australians, Americans. I got some great American friends, but we Aussies are a little different. And I wanted my kids to experience being Aussies in Australia. And also I wanted to save a little bit of money on the very high college fees in the US. So coming back to Australia, going to a good Aussie university was exciting. So we came back in time for them to do their HSC and so forth. What did I learn? Yeah, sorry, I was just going to ask.
Yeah, so then, so then you came back and you've applied those skills of, venture capitalism and getting the funds to start up EVIE. Is that how it sort of all got put together then?
Yeah, so really, I did a lot. I did several, as well as working in big tech companies. I did a lot of startups in hydrogen, for example. Led a hydrogen fuel cell company and talked to General Motors and Ford about that technology way back then. Ran a venture capital fund, came back. What did I learn? I think what I learned was don't take anything for granted. And so in the approach that I brought back was build it, test it, and learn from that, and then refine based on build, test, learn. And I think that's a good approach for any fleet manager that wants to electrify their fleet, is just get started, build something, get working, test, learn, and then refine it. And you've got the time to do that now. I think now is a good time to do that. The other thing I learned is don't assume the future is going to be like the past. And so the example for electric vehicles is a lot of people tend to assume, I'm just going to get rid of my petrol or diesel car, I'm going to buy an electric and life will continue the same. But actually it won't be, because these electric vehicles are natively digital devices. You know, they're like your smartphone, and in the same way that, you know, basically carrying around a powerful computer in your pocket changed your life, having a powerfully computerized car is going to change your life and your business. It's going to be very different. And so we have these trends of on-demand transportation, electric transportation, and then next up is autonomous transportation. And that's going to have a massive impact on the way, not only that fleets operate, but also the way that logistics, for example, operate, because the cost of transportation is going to drop massively because of those three things together. And it will change the relationship between warehousing costs, transportation costs, and customer order lead times. So it really changes the way that the transportation industry is going to play. So don't think linearly, think exponentially, because that's where we are right now.
So, wow, it's just also fascinating. I guess I'm just trying to get to the kernel of you, like what drives you, and do you want to? I've spoken with you. You know, lucky enough to sit next to you at some of these functions that we've been to, and I know that you talk about electrification of transport is opening up opportunities for people who otherwise might not have had them. Do you want to talk a little bit about that sort of idea and and, you know, to just somehow get in like what is motivating you?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. A great thing about what are the opportunities, because definitely, you know, it's very important for our kids, our grandkids, you know, our future generations to solve problems around tailpipe emissions and climate change. But actually, how these things tend to actually change is because the economics make sense, and economics are about opportunity. And I think they're about opportunity at all kinds of levels. And so when we think about the business, you know, is where do we create the opportunities? How can people benefit from these lower costs of operating transportation? How can people benefit from the extra data? So I'm kind of a big believer that you can make money, but you can also be doing good when you're making money. And if you get that right, then you're going to, you know, solve for both problems. You're going to solve for economic opportunity as well as solving for climate change and pollution and air quality. So that's kind of what gets me out of bed in the morning, is feeling that, we are changing the world here and that we are creating opportunity. We're doing good. I think a lot of the people at EVIE feel that they feel like we're in a purpose-driven organisation, no matter where they came from. And, you know, I've been 20 years in clean energy and so on, and many of our people are actually just coming into this industry from all kinds of different places, from telecoms, from all kinds of places that didn't spend their life thinking about these sorts of things. And I think they've been carried away in that sense that we're doing good for our planet, for our country, for our people. And benefits, it's literally, you know, just imagine for a family, what's their biggest energy bill? And often it's not their electricity bill, which is, you know, can be substantial, a couple of $1,000. It's actually their petrol and diesel bill. So if you have an electric, sure, your electricity bill is going to go up a little bit, but your overall energy bill is going to go down, and because you're paying less for fuel from a week to week and a month to month basis. And it's just the same for a business as well. You're going to, you know, your fueling costs are going to go down by 75%. And so what do you do with that money? Well, you invest it in the things that are really important to you, your family, you're making sure you get an education for your kids and yourselves, having that little bit extra to improve your life and so forth. And so I kind of really believe this is a massive opportunity for families, and then for businesses as well, to repurpose that. And then it's the time that you're saving. People sometimes get kind of carried away. Oh, where am I going to fill it up? There's not enough charging stations. Well, actually, for something like 70% of households, they can plug in at home. And so every morning they're going to wake up with a full tank. So you just saved a visit to the petrol station. And even if you do need, you live in an apartment or you're a share home or whatever, like many Uber drivers do, you're still charging while you're doing something else. So you go to your local shopping centre, and now each of the 3 shopping centres that around where I live are actually, all of them have EV chargers in them. And you just pull up, you plug in, and then you go and do your weekly shop. Again, you just save time. It's more convenient. It's easy. So it's just a matter of us, doing our part, and that's getting as many of these stations out there as possible, both in public, but also for fleets and so forth, to enable that. So lots of opportunity, I think, coming up. The other thing is just the savings. So the Australian Medical Association worked out, I think, that something like $3 billion in annual health costs as a result of tailpipe emissions. It's kids with asthma. It's the impact of over many years of breathing in all those particulate matter. So that's another $3 billion that we can do something else with, that we can dedicate to health or education.
And live longer lives.
And live longer lives, yeah. And I'm kind of getting a little older now and starting to think about these things a bit. We've all got parents that have Alzheimer's and so on. There was a recent thing saying that this tailpipe emissions, particulate matter, actually appear to be a contributor to these degenerative brain diseases. Because they're so tiny that they get inside your bloodstream and circulate around you. So
like
it's good to be part of solving that.
NOx emissions, particularly for dieselisation in Australia. The other thing I wanted to make a comment on, EVIE recently hosted a Women of Electric Vehicles networking session. So thanks very much for that. And I met a lot of fabulous women from EVIE there. Do you think that this sort of EV revolution has opened up opportunities for women as well? I mean, there seem to be a lot of bright young women at your organisation.
Certainly. Well, I agree with that, and I think we're a company that is named after a woman, EVIE, and so we should try hard is in terms of that. But I think diversity is a huge source of strength and innovation, because diversity brings different mindsets, and it could be gender, it could be orientation, it could be ethnicity, it could be ability or the way you think. And so we kind of seek that out. It's kind of hard. You look at transportation and infrastructure industries, which we straddle, is they haven't traditionally been great. They've been very science, technology and engineering related. And we as a society have not been great at getting women into those fields and taking advantage of what they're able to bring to these fields. So I'm kind of really great. It's really great to see, some of the people you met who are across all facets of the business. It could be in project management for our infrastructure rollout, software development engineers, product managers, our head of finance, our Josie, who's in our site acquisition, but also does a lot of work in our government affairs and so forth. And I don't want to. I'm proud that we supported that. I'd love to do the same in Melbourne and Brisbane, because I think also just having those networks helps bring up all of the women in there, because you can talk to each other and go, oh, well, what challenges are you facing? Some of those challenges are relevant to women. Some of them are just relevant to being an engineer or being a finance person or a site act person. You can learn and have support from your peers and develop together. So we've definitely got to do more. And can electrification benefit women? Well, a lot of the burden of families is often borne by women in one way or another. That's kind of the reality, I think, still. And so if you can save families money, if you can save them time, if you can, I think a lot of that will actually be to the benefit of women, ultimately. But we're always got to be trying harder and doing more.
Now, I promised, that we would talk about your recent trip. So when did you get home? Like just yesterday or something?
I got back on Thursday morning, and I sort of got straight back into it.
Yeah, I commend you for that. So what? Just tell us about some of the events or the excitement. What's the buzz in the US?
Yeah. Well, I went to a fantastic meeting in Detroit, which is about the user experience. What's it like for individuals and fleets to interact with electric vehicles and electric vehicle chargers? So that was really interesting because it was kind of very much a nuts and bolts, but it also made me, there was a lot of utilities there, and it made me realize that some of the local utilities here are actually, as advanced as anyone in the world in how they think about this, and perhaps more so. Then I went to EVS 36. Okay, so Electric Vehicle Symposium number 36. It's an annual event. We've got up to number 36. That tells you something, that people have been thinking about this and working on this. So EVS 1 was 36 years ago.
Wow.
Held in Austin, and there was, I think, a dozen of them. I've seen a photo. It looked like, some kind of nerdy science guys with the pocket protectors and some hippies, and they were sort of gathered around a car that they'd converted into electric using, basically lead acid automotive. It's come a long way. This conference is the biggest in the world. It was held in Sacramento, which is one of the leaders in terms of, it's the capital of California. So it's a leader in transportation policy, electric vehicle policy, and so forth. So great opportunity to talk to lots of people there. I think, what did I learn out of that? Well, I learned that we're actually starting to hold our head high in Australia, I think, in terms of what we're doing. We're starting to get relatively good coverage of public charging in metropolitan areas in Australia. And I think Europe is actually has quite good intercity coverage, but still struggling a little bit with urban coverage. Urban coverage in the United States is often quite poorly cited, and partly as a result of over-subsidization by governments of the charging infrastructure. And so what it meant is that the people deploying that infrastructure didn't have enough skin in the game to choose really good sites. And that's, and therefore, a lot of those sites are underutilized, or people are not getting a good charging experience. In other words, they're sitting in their car on their phone because it's a 10-minute walk to get a cup of coffee while their car charges, or the locations are, behind a building next to the dumpsters instead of in a nice, secure, well-lit location, which is the sort of thing we look at. Learnings for fleets. I think definitely there are very strong incentives for fleets in the US and California. A lot of that's driven by emissions, particularly around ports, which have a lot of in and outbound transportation, drayage trucks and so forth like that. And so there's a very strong push in both the United States and Europe to electrify fleets. But the challenge is getting hold of the vehicles. And so definitely we're seeing lots of utes in Australia and in the United States. When we talk about a ute in the US, we mean a pickup, and it's a bloody massive big truck. But we've got the Ford F-150 Lightning, which is a great looking truck if you're into big trucks. It's bigger than most Australian utes. It's fully electric. I saw quite a few of those actually deployed with fleets. We're starting to see vans, again, in the US, somewhat larger, in Europe, more similar to the size of vans that we tend to use. Everyone wants to do it because they can see the benefits. They're getting good support from the government. They just can't get hold of the vehicles. And so I was talking to entities that have deployed charging into depots, but are just have been waiting 6 months to get vehicles delivered. Now, is that good? Is that bad? I think for Australian fleets, there are light vehicles available now. The vans are starting to come in. So Ford e-Transit, we're seeing some vehicles from China, for example, coming in. You've got time to learn using light vehicles, and maybe, you know, if you can snag some of those early vans coming into the country. I think it's probably less than 100 vans in the country at the moment. Get in there, learn now, because I think that supply chain thing will be released at some stage. But even in the US, it's still hard to get there. Prime movers. So definitely we're seeing prime movers starting to be deployed in the United States, particularly around ports, because of the big pollution issues around ports. Still early days, and one of the big challenges there is, you know, how do you charge them? And so there are big national programs in the US for intercity truck charging, and so we're now talking about big sites with 5, 10 or more megawatt connections and lots of chargers, and that's quite difficult, because in the US, I think some of the utilities there have fallen behind in maintaining their networks, and therefore are having trouble provisioning those sizes of grid connections.
Paul, amazing. I feel that everything is in great hands, and there's just so many conversations ahead of you, and so much experience. We're very fortunate to have you and EVIE on our show and in our country. Thank you, Paul.
You're very welcome. Happy to come on again. We can drill down a bit, or perhaps some of the other members of our teams, perhaps some of the women from our team could jump on and do a podcast too, because I think they've got lots to say as well.
You've been listening to Fleet News Group podcast. It was edited and produced by Isabella Fiorentino. You can follow us on Spotify. Just search for Fleet News Group. We're also on Instagram, Facebook and YouTube. Our website is fleetnewsgroup.com, where you can get all of our stories, videos and podcasts. Until next time, drive safely and take care.